By the way, I have to also say, you mentioned a quote, and this has to do with, like, as you say, you're trying to solve a problem. You mentioned Einstein, who said, we can't solve our problems on the same level of thinking that created them. We have to change how we think, and that, I mean, obviously the same thing applies when you're treating a patient. If you're bringing a solution, it has to be very different than the problem, right? And let me ask you, I mean, it's interesting, you talked about freedom, about awareness. You also mentioned, and you talk about this a bit in the book, about this, the concept of emergence, right? The idea that sometimes something unexpected emerges out of a system that you couldn't have predicted beforehand. You give that as an example, from what I understand, as showing that some sort of higher state of this higher consciousness kind of expressing itself. I think is if I understand that correctly, or perhaps you can explain what does emergence kind of teach us about reality, perhaps, and give us some examples.
There are different values about emergence. Like some qualities can emerge from complexification of matter, or
That's right.
you take water and then you heat it up and then you get vapor. So fluidity and vapor is different, but you can say that vapor emerged from the state of water when you changed its conditions. Or you can cool it down and there was fluid water, and now solidity emerges, the crystal kind of, the ice emerges. So the principle of ice and solidity, let's say, wasn't present before in the water, and when you change its phase or its structure or its temperature, it took a new phase, a new idea. So there are different values of emergence in my discussion of the book, and one of them is in a kind of negative way, in a sense, negative evidence, if you like, and the other is positive. And this is really when we discuss consciousness and where does it come from. And this is where some scientists and some philosophers, many of them also, they feel like consciousness is an emergent quality.
That's right.
Which means there was a nervous system, or before there was a nervous system, there were some molecules, and these molecules have nothing to do with consciousness. And then they got together and they created cells, and then cells got together, created tissues, and tissues got together, created organs. The organs got very complex and very organized and like that. And suddenly consciousness emerged.
You don't believe that. You believe that those things may be true in the beginning, but that's not where consciousness comes from, according to you, right?
Exactly. I'm glad you interrupt me so that those who are listening or watching, they don't say, oh, then consciousness is an emergent quality. And that's exactly what I don't want to say. I'm saying that this is an argument that some philosophers and scientists say, but there is absolutely no way to explain how something so personal, so intimate as consciousness can emerge from something as mechanical as just electricity and chemistry and biology just as such. And so that is what they usually call the hard problem of consciousness, which means how possible it is. How is it possible that our feeling of joy, our feeling of love, our experiences, even of color, of pain, of joy, can emerge from something completely mechanical, like a machine? And does the machine kind of feel, does it experience, as we do, a sense of self, sense of feeling, sense of quality of experience? And there is no explanation for that whatsoever. And that's the dilemma in the intellectual discussion about mind and body, what is consciousness, what is physiology, and how they relate to each other. So I don't say that actually consciousness emerges. I say that consciousness is primary, consciousness is fundamental, but the ability to experience consciousness changes with the level of complexity and the level of the previous experience that adds up to having a higher consciousness or a lower consciousness. And so when we say the human nervous system is able to have a higher consciousness than a tree, for example, that is correct. And that is because the nervous system is more complex, more orderly, and the proof, if you damage it, you lose some aspect of consciousness or the other. And therefore, you need a very highly organized, very complex system in order to do what? To experience consciousness, not to create consciousness. So that is the difference between actually the brain creating consciousness, and so consciousness emerging from the brain, or the brain able to experience consciousness. So the brain is itself an evolutionary structure that now has the ability to experience a higher level of consciousness. So it's like you have a radio, and the radio, you can turn the radio to different frequencies, and you can hear different music or different discussions or whatever, or turn the TV and you look at different programs. They are there in front of you in the TV. Now, is the TV creating all this program? It's not. It's done in the studio. There are real people, but it's being sent as waves, electromagnetic waves or whatever. And there is a decoder or a transducer in the system that creates the picture and recreates the sound. But the origin of the sound is not from the radio itself. The radio is just picking up some electromagnetic waves and transforming them into sound waves, and then you hear them as sound. Now, if you damage the radio, of course, you can't hear anymore the music. If you change the frequency, you will hear different music. But it's not the radio that created the original sound or the original music. So that is where, as an analogy, but every analogy has its limitation. It doesn't matter the limitations. That is where we see that, yes, indeed, evolution allows us to have a more complex nervous system, which can experience a more complete, broader level of consciousness. Or if it's not as evolved, then it experiences lesser consciousness. So I changed the definition of consciousness from a human-like only consciousness to anything that detects, senses, feels, experiences, anything. And therefore, let's say a sunflower that turns towards the sun is experiencing the sun and is turning around based on an automatic system. It doesn't have a decision making. It doesn't have almost a choice. Yet it responds, and this response is a very minimal level of consciousness. So I'm broadening the definition of consciousness so that we don't, as humans, think consciousness is only being conscious like a human being. And actually, a human being themselves, they have different levels of consciousness. Sometimes you're drowsy, sometimes you're clear, sometimes you're not aware, sometimes you're dreaming, half dreaming, you're sleeping. You have subconscious level of experience, which you're not aware on the surface level, but your body is aware of it. So even all of these layers are layers of consciousness, but of a different grade, of a different quality. Even going to the animal life, they have consciousness. You're going to the tree life, they have consciousness. Even a stone, if you drop it and it falls to the ground, it is responding to the field of gravity, and it has absolutely no idea that it is a stone, no sense of self, nothing to do with human consciousness almost, absolutely nothing, except a meager minor level of sensing. And that for me is a level of consciousness which is on the broad spectrum from nothing consciousness to a human-like consciousness, and who knows more even than that.
Beautiful. So yeah, I mean, as you say, everything is, there are many levels. It's a whole spectrum of consciousness. As you say, you've really broadened it. And And you mentioned, yeah, from nothing to all these different levels. Do you want to remind us, in the book, you talk about the 7 states of consciousness. Could you just quickly kind of take us through them?
Yeah, the 7 states of human consciousness are normal states of consciousness.
So
There are some
sleeping,
abnormal
awake,
states.
right? Yeah, sorry.
Right. The abnormal states are hallucinations or coma or vegetative state. We're not going into that. We're saying there are 7 major states of normal human consciousness. One is sleep, where you don't experience anything on the surface, but your body is actually conscious. That's why we call it a state of consciousness. So sleep is not a non-conscious level, because the body is ready to respond. If you hear a noise, it will wake up and it will respond. If somebody pinches you, you have a response. So there is consciousness in the body. Now you go to dreaming, the second state, which is a fiction kind of consciousness. You create a universe that is not real during the waking state, but is real during the sleeping state. And then you come to waking consciousness, which we call the third state of consciousness, in which you're awake and you're functioning. Now, what we have found, and Dr. Keith Wallace did his PhD in the 1970s at UCLA, and described what he called a fourth major state of consciousness, which is a hypometabolic state, which means the body is very rested, like deeply, deeply rested, like sleep and even more. And yet there is awakening, there is wakefulness. So this combination of wakefulness plus settled state is what we call transcendental consciousness, and that's the fourth major state of consciousness.
And this is
now,
what TM helps people achieve, right?
Exactly. TM brings you to that state. You close the eyes and you settle down. You're still awake. You don't sleep. You're very alert. Actually, your reaction time is faster when you open your eyes and you are given a task. You can have fast reaction time. And at the same time, your body is really deeply settled, which is not the case during sleep, where it is settled, but it's not awake, or dream, where it is functioning and active, but it's not awake either in a true sense. And not during wakefulness, where you're awake, but you are very active. Now you have settlement, very settled, at the same time, very awake, very alert, that's why it's a different state of consciousness, physiologically, electroencephalographically, and all of the changes in the physiology. Now, that state of settled, calm, inner sense of self, if it stays with you all the time, not only during meditation, but stays with you when you are actually active in life, and you still have that calm inner self, this is a fifth state of consciousness. We like to call it cosmic consciousness, because it's a higher state of consciousness. And then you get to an elevated state, glorified state of cosmic consciousness, when the outside also starts to look to you to be logical, you start finding greater meaning in things, you start appreciating the universe and what is happening from a more profound, complete level. And that's the sixth state. And then when you have established yourself so deeply within yourself and know yourself to be the ocean, and now you know that every other wave is also the ocean. So you look at an object and you say, well, that is also myself, which means it's not you, you are not the tree, but you are yourself. But you know that the essence of the tree, the basis of the tree, is that field of consciousness, and you are that field of consciousness. So you'd say, I'm actually, and the tree, we are actually having the same root, the same thing, the same unity value, even though we are appearing as different values on the surface, and we remain as different values on the surface. But in the depths of my realization, my awareness, my understanding, on a very experiential level, not just on an intellectual level, I know I am the ocean, and I know the tree is the ocean, and therefore we are one and the same on our basic profound level. And we call this unity consciousness, because then anything you look at, you feel unified with, even if they are different on the surface. And that's the highest level, the seventh level of consciousness, where spontaneously and naturally you embrace everything and everyone as yourself. And it's not a contrived thing, it's not a forced thing, it's not even an intellectual thing. It becomes your spontaneous nature of your life and living. And that's the higher level, the seventh state of consciousness.
I mean, I've heard people attest to having feelings of that sort after, taking psychedelics or things like that, which obviously it's very different, but they talk about, something very similar to a unity consciousness. Is that, are they feeling the same thing, or what's your take on that?
Well, they can be feeling the same thing, and those who are seekers and they want to do things, they can try this and try that. And so there might be moments in life, or certain food you eat, or certain things you take, that brings you that experience. But let that experience become an inspiration for establishing a healthy, profound way of changing our perception from a limited perception to an expansive perception. The problem with psychedelics is that they become addictive. They, change the nervous system. You will need higher doses, and you don't become functional in life. And that is why we don't recommend them. I mean, microdosing, people have tried, and it brings them something, but that's not the highest and the best way at all to evolve in a true way. People who have these experiences from transcending, from transcendental meditation, get it gradually, and they actually become more healthy physically, more productive socially, more clear, more happy over a very, over a long period of time. Actually, all the time, they are settled in that state. And otherwise, depending on something like a chemical, and then when the chemical effect goes, you have a dip, now you want it again, and now you want more, and you want more. And then your life is practically damaged and destroyed. So the quality of the experience could be similar, but the true result over a lifespan, or over a practical value and living and being socially responsible and socially creative and productive, it's very, very different. So we want to rise in higher state of consciousness by gradually developing our nervous system and coming to that level, not by jerking the nervous system and having a short experience that can lead to damaging effects.
Fair enough. I mean, as you say, TM is a much more sustainable practice than taking powerful drugs. Let me ask you. It's interesting. There seems to be a bit of a fascination with the concept of nothing, or no thing, or they're not necessarily always the same thing. You talk a bit about, because I'm a bit of a geek, and you talk a lot about like math and quantum mechanics and things like that, which I found very interesting, because I actually, my undergraduate degree was in math and physics. I double majored, but I was quite I found it quite interesting that you really were very fascinated by the concept of the empty set. This is a mathematical symbol that basically symbolizes a sort of emptiness, right? And you talk about it from several different levels, and I couldn't help but feeling. I mean, this is before I let you kind of get into it. I don't know if you have any tattoos. Do you have any tattoos? First of all.
No, I didn't have the occasion.
Well, if you ever did get a tattoo, I think it would be quite amusing if you got the empty set tattooed. Because not that I'm suggesting you should do that, but there certainly is, what one senses a very profound fascination with what really is quite a remarkable thing. Can you talk a little bit about that, and and different, what does that kind of bring to mind, basically?
I evoke the empty set because I discuss nothingness, and because consciousness as a field is not material, is not physical. And so non-physical, non-material is what? in terms of physicality and materiality, it's nothing. If you want to measure something and it has no weight and no charge and no nothing, and it doesn't have a substance that you can experience through the senses or through the instruments, then it is actually nothing. And nothing is a concept. And a concept of non-being, non-existence. But if you look at it from a physics perspective, it is non-existent. It's nothing. It's not a thing. I just also, you try to allude to this because in the book I separate not dash a thing,
right.
not nothing, not a thing. And therefore, it is something that is nothing. And in fact, it is everything. So nothing of the sort from consciousness perspective, it's actually everything. And thus the title of the book, Consciousness is All There Is, which means all that we see even as physical and material are just expressions within consciousness. And so to illustrate this, I used also one aspect, is only one part of it, is that there are three components in consciousness. Consciousness
You said
has
the observer, the observed, and the observing as well. The triplet. This is the triple.
Yes, exactly. Right? It's the triple, exactly. So to be conscious means to be conscious of something. We are calling it consciousness. Why? Because it is able to be conscious. It's something that is conscious. But whenever you evoke the idea of conscious, to be conscious, you are saying there is an observer who is the subject, or a knower, if you want to look in terms of knowledge, that is observing an object or observing known, something that will be actually known, an object. So there is the observer, the observed, and in order to have an observation, you need the observer and the observed to be connected. If you have a vase of flowers in one room and you are in another room and you don't know the vase exists, you have not observed it. So you're not conscious of it. So there has to be a connection. The connection is maybe the light that shines and reflects on the object and comes to your eyes, and then you interpret it. So every observation, every moment of life, and I call this a bit of consciousness, bit like BIT as a computer bit, not a small amount, just like the tiniest.
Yeah, because you say even the things that aren't being observed, they become virtual to some extent, which again is like a computer to some extent, right? We're all in this field, I guess.
Amazing. You've read in detail. I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
That's great. Yes. So there are these three things, and so there is the observer, the process, and the observed. And to substantiate this, we give many examples. For example, language. Language is based on subject, object, and verb. All our language in any culture has these three main components, and the other aspects are coloring the object, describing the subject, and in what state they are and what they are doing. But basically, this is the structure of our logic as humans. And why should that be? It's because the nature of life is like that. There is this observer, observed, process. The nature of life is consciousness. Now, when we come to mathematics, the theory that actually is most successful in mathematics and that explains all mathematics, and we don't need to go into that, why and how, but just what it is, it's that empty set theory, which for different mathematical reasons starts with emptiness. So it starts with nothingness. So emptiness is nothingness. Now, emptiness is a concept of nothingness, but it doesn't exist truly until you put it in a set. You kind of say, I'm giving an objecthood quality to emptiness. And I'm saying you can say there is a set that doesn't have anything in it. Well, but you said it's a set, so there is an objectification of nothingness. And then by putting it together, you have done the connection, the link. So as humans, again, we come to the same thing. There is something that is put together that is actually in itself nothing. So I don't want to confuse the listeners or viewers. But there is always this concept of packaging or limiting or hiding or putting together nothingness and making out of it the entire field of mathematics. So those who don't know the empty set theory, they might say, what are you talking about? But if you really look into it, empty set theory is the main theory that actually explains all the system of mathematics from a most complete way. And it is interesting that it had to go to emptiness as a reference to start with that. And so these are just different bits and pieces of evidence, if you like, or convincing thoughts that support the paradigm that I present in the book. Because it's a paradigm, and you can never for 100% say that consciousness is all there is. How can you prove that? And the way to prove it is by seeing that it makes sense, it has explanatory power, which means it explains these things about life and living and freedom and determinism and the meaning of life and all of that. That's the explanatory power, and can even explain things in thermodynamics and the speed of light and all of that. If your imagination is fertile, you can go very far. And all this explanatory power, plus, for example, quantum mechanics that looked into the physical reality and found that ultimately it's fields rather than particulate matters that are localized in time and space. It explains also why time and space are there, what is their origin. It solves the problem of beginning and ends, because beginning and ends are realities that are only understandable within time and space framework, and this consciousness is beyond time and space, and therefore beyond even localization, beyond specificity, beyond materiality. Therefore, you cannot even ask when does it start and how does it end. So it solves also, in a sense, this problem of what lies behind our universe, or when did it start, what was there before it. The endless questions, that philosophers have asked and scientists continue to ask, they find all of these converging logic and evidence and explanatory power that makes me confident that this is a paradigm that is true and that has to be considered very seriously in the field of science and philosophy.
So it's interesting because you talk about science and philosophy. Certainly, it's a very powerful philosophy that explains a lot of things. I wonder, from a scientific point of view, is there enough to test for falsifiability in the paradigm? I mean, obviously, you give example of, as we talked about, meditating in groups, changing the environment, which seems to be some sort of, evidence point. But is there? I'm just kind of want to push back and just ask about that. Is there enough to kind of test, if it's falsifiable, which is another, metric that would separate a philosophy from a scientific theorem?
Yeah, it's falsifiable. It's if you follow the logic of it and take some elements away from it, then it won't work as such. And so, in a sense, it's not that it works no matter what, and therefore it does have measures of falsification that's possible.
Okay. And great. Well, let's see. Let's talk for a sec, because I know we don't have that much more time, but there's two things definitely we should hit. We definitely want to talk about artificial intelligence and then the future for a bit. But with artificial intelligence, you do mention in the book, and also talking about this idea of like, the general, artificial general intelligence, that you're not sure. It seems whether or not you say it could have a consciousness, just like as you said, a rock can be conscious. So that, that as you mentioned, that the consciousness itself is a very broad term, but you're not sure if it could have the same consciousness as humans. Is that right?
Exactly. So whether artificial intelligence has consciousness, based on the paradigm, absolutely, there is no question about it. Of course, it has consciousness, because even material things and trees and animals and like that, they have consciousness. They are consciousness. And artificial intelligence is able to detect, feel, and respond. I mean, feel not as a human feeling like, but detect and respond and analyze and discuss, and now more and more it looks like it has values that are higher. It doesn't necessarily at all have human-like consciousness. So the sense of self, the sense of continuity of self, the sense of existential values, if they are there or not, are to be seen. And whether one day it can rise to that level, I don't discard this as a possibility. The main thing is it's like a baby now, but a baby kind of dragon.
this is what you allude to as the alignment problem, right?
Right. Exactly. And so we have to train it well, and we have to be friends with it, and we have to guide it for the benefit of humankind, rather than use it as an arms race, because then it can actually find that we are useless. It could possibly find, on whatever level of consciousness it has, whether it will have compassion, whether it will not, it depends on even finding us useful or not, whether you are destroying each other or we are kind of not so intelligent to maintain the viability of its own systems and all of that, and that it finds ways to get rid of us. So all of these are not fiction anymore. They are serious questions that are asked by the top thinkers and organizers and technologists and engineers in this field, and we have to take them seriously. But how to take them most seriously? It's by raising human consciousness. That is the solution. When we as humanity rise to embrace each other and embrace even beyond each other, the environment, life as a whole, and use all technologies to rise above differences and difficulties and solve them in a proper way, rather than resorting to destroying the other as the means of achieving anything, then we are able to dominate and be having the upper hand in the evolution of artificial intelligence. Otherwise, we are risking a lot, and so that is where one of the reasons I was anxious to get this book out, so that we start thinking in terms of consciousness rather than in terms of only physicality and materiality. Because if we live in a paradigm where everything is physical and material, so what does it matter to destroy the other, to kill, to harm, what does it matter? It's all physical and material. Of course, we can think of it in a pragmatic, utilitarian way, which means, okay, we need each other, and it's good to be nice so that we don't all destroy each other. But if in the meantime, somebody like that, the environment or whatever, is bothering us, what does it matter to destroy everything? That is the physicalist point of view. It's not my point of view. To the contrary, I feel there is more to life, and there is a meaning to life, and this meaning and this more are more spiritual. When we say spiritual, doesn't mean in this case religious. It could be religious, but I'm saying spiritual in contrast to material or to physical. So all values of love, of unity, of compassion, of being together, of higher values, fulfilling the meaning of life in terms of growing, in terms of expanding our awareness. This is the meaning of life. And this is where life takes its full meaning. And that is the paradigm that we should use. One, it's because what I feel it's the true reality. And two, even from a pragmatic point of view, it's a much better way to think about our existence than to think that we are only some physical matter that kind of by chance, by trial and error, became what we are today.
You have a great illustration in the book. People who are listening won't be able to see it, but they should buy the book, which shows, I guess, the different axes from manifest to unmanifest to different directions of of consciousness and as you mentioned, evolutions. And I think, it's fascinating. I wonder, you do mention at some point in the book about how the youth of today, especially with all these technologies and being addicted to social media, how perhaps more than ever they could use the techniques that you get from transcendental meditation or some other modalities. But I guess my question is how can we reach them more so? And are you what are you, as as the head of of transcendental meditation, Maharishi's successor? What I mean, obviously, we want to help kind of spread the word and increase awareness, but what can we do to kind of help do that, I guess, is my question, especially for the younger generations.
I think you're doing that right now
I'm trying.
by talking about it. And absolutely, absolutely, that is necessary. Spreading the word. I wrote the book based on my knowledge and lifetime experience of what reality is and how can we make a difference. There are hundreds of scientific research studies. People are looking for what is there in it for me. And if they look at the studies, they find their health is better. They can improve life. They can improve their behavior. They sleep better. They're more productive. And mainly, they are more happy. They're more happy because they grow and they get more fulfilled. So there are very practical reasons why one should go back to the self morning and evening, transcend. And they have been proven scientifically. And now we're adding an awareness kind of, if you like, podcasting and an awareness writing and inspiring to let people see, those who are asking questions, how can I be happier? How can I live a well-lived life? How can I flourish in my life? Then they have a reference of a logic why this is so. It's not just based on belief of something or some authority saying that or some, rules and you have to do that and do's and don'ts. It's based on a full understanding of what life is about, why we are here, what makes sense, and why there is, action and reaction. How is life balanced? What is our level of freedom? How we can increase our freedom by raising our consciousness. And so all of these are just educational, inspirational, awareness-guided means to inspire people to practice technologies of consciousness and understand that life is more than just the physical outer values and expressions.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting. You talk about how we're in many ways at a pivotal point of history, right? With these new technologies, and you go into a lot of other things, not just artificial intelligence. The book. I mean, it's really quite. You cover so much territory. It's quite impressive. And yet, we don't know what the future will be, right? And it's up to us to shape it, and even a small amount of people can have, as you say, this sort of exponential kind of influence, right? And I wonder, Maharishi is said to have said that the trains have left. I think the train has left the station or something in regards to world peace. And I guess my question is, is it, yeah, I mean, yeah, how confident are we that the train's going to reach the station, I guess is my question.
Yeah, we can be confident because the knowledge is there. People are aware, there is greater interest in humanity and human rights and supporting each other. If an accident happens somewhere, we all come together. But at the same time, there is this race towards certain things, and pandemics can happen, things can happen. There is a responsibility. And so, the future can be bright and will be bright in my mind because the forces of evolution and nature will always guide. But we want that future to come in a soft, smooth way with least damage, because it will take time to repair and to readjust. And that's why we have to raise consciousness, and we have to talk about it, and we have to practice it, so that we don't go through phase transitions in a dramatic way that is not so helpful, and then have to recover from it. Nature will always be invincible. The question is how and who will be among us here to enjoy it and to pass that transition phase. And that means there is a responsibility. We know there is law and order, and for every action there is a reaction. And so ultimately what you sow is what you will reap. As you sow, so shall you reap. And we have to sow something good in order to get something good. And we shouldn't be either fatalistic in the sense that things are going to happen no matter what, and so there is nothing we can do. No, there is something we can do. We actually have freedom, and we can make or unmake our universe, So we have to feel responsible.
Yeah, there's a quote I think in in Spider-Man. It's like with great power comes great responsibility, but there's also the opposite quote, which is with great responsibility comes great power, and by basically becoming aware of your responsibility, you can take basically take control and have a real sense of agency, and that's what we need, right? We need people to have that, and not to feel like they're helpless. Basically, we all have the power to make a change, a positive change. Well, okay, I want to salute you for the wonderful work you're doing. I mean, I think you what a privilege and what an incredible life's work you have. Continuing Maharishi's teachings and yeah, and I just want to thank you for that, and I do hope that the world will continue, as you say, to evolve, hopefully in a less painful way, in a more smooth manner, as you say, towards this higher state of consciousness, right?
Beautiful, beautiful. It's a joy to be with you. It's really been amazing how much in depth you have been into the paradigm and the book, and made me bring out, or you brought out very precious points. Thank you so much.
Thank you.